Revenge promises justice, but often leaves us trapped in the very pain we seek to escape. Why do we feel the urge to hurt when we've been hurt? This question plagues the human condition. The wounded heart does not simply seek healing, it seeks to make another bleed. Why is that? Why do we hurt others in the name of our own suffering? Pain has a peculiar way of distorting our perceptions. It distorts our sense of justice, clouds our judgment, and twists the very fabric of our responses. We feel wronged, and therefore we must right the wrong. But the question is, who defines what is right? Is the urge to retaliate a rational response, or is it the echo of something far deeper, far darker? We often think of revenge as a deliberate act, something we consciously choose. But in reality, it's a reflex, a knee-jerk response embedded in the psyche. When we are hurt, our instinct is not to process the wound, but to strike back. In a world that strips us of our autonomy, retaliation is a way of reclaiming power. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, spoke of the shadow, the unconscious part of ourselves, containing all that we repress, all that we fear, and often all that we project onto others. He writes, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. The shadow is not an external force, it is within us. And it is this very shadow that fuels the urge for revenge. We project our pain onto others because it is too difficult to confront within ourselves. The anger we feel towards another is not born purely of their actions, but of the unresolved emotions lurking within us. Pain seeks a place to hide, and it hides in the form of retaliation. But what happens when we strike back? In the moment of revenge, we feel powerful, we feel vindicated. We think that we've restored balance, that we've brought justice. But what if I told you that each act of retaliation is simply a wound that perpetuates itself? The moment you strike, you become the wound. You carry the wound. You pass it on. Nietzsche once wrote, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." Revenge, my dear listener, does not restore balance. It only adds weight to an already heavy burden. The moment you decide to lash out, you take the very thing you despise and make it part of you. In the end, it is not the other who is the villain. It is you. But why do we fall into this trap so easily? Why do we allow ourselves to be consumed by this cyclical destruction? The answer, perhaps, lies in the logic of our existence. Pain is often seen as an injustice, something that should be righted. But as Hannah Arendt reflected, evil in its most banal form is not always the grand visible monstrosities. Sometimes it is simply the quiet, unchecked response to an insult, the reactionary action born of unchecked emotions. So why do we do this? Why do we allow ourselves to perpetuate this cycle of pain? It is because we fear change. Pain is a constant, something we know, something we can control by reacting. It is far harder to stop, to truly confront the feelings that seek retaliation. To not react is to risk vulnerability. To confront the wound directly is to risk looking into the darkness inside oneself and seeing it for what it truly is. But it is in this confrontation that true healing can occur. When you seek revenge, you remain trapped in a cycle of reflection. You become nothing more than a mirror for the hurt that was done to you. You may think that you are the one inflicting the blow, but you are not. The blow is self-inflicted. It is your ego that needs validation, your pain that seeks a reflection, not the world's response. Nietzsche again provides insight. The greatest events, they are not our loudest, but our stillest hours. The stillness, the pause between action and reaction, is where healing lies. It is not in striking back, but in confronting the impulse to do so that one transcends the wound. When you stop and look at the pain you carry, instead of turning it into something that can be thrown, you open a door to something greater. But of course, the path to stillness is not easy. It requires tremendous effort, tremendous self-awareness. And often we resist it because it means confronting something darker than we want to admit. It means looking at the parts of us that we repress. It means accepting that our pain is not just the result of what was done to us, but of how we choose to carry it forward. Pain, when left unchecked, grows into resentment. Sigmund Freud described this as repetition compulsion, the tendency to replay past traumas over and over. But in doing so, we never truly escape them. We become our wounds, we act out of them, and we create new wounds which only feed the cycle. But how do we escape this? How do we stop the cycle? The answer, paradoxically, may lie in acceptance. To stop seeking revenge is not to forgive instantly, nor is it to condone what has been done. It is simply to recognize the futility of responding in kind. Revenge will not make the pain go away, it will not erase the wrongs, it will only add to them. What if, instead of feeding the fire, we could let it burn itself out? What if, instead of reaching for the knife, we could step away from it and face our true adversary, the pain within? The pain that seeks to be perpetuated and replicated. There is a powerful freedom in this understanding. The moment you choose not to retaliate, you break the chain. You stop the transfer of suffering. You cease being the mirror. You cease being the reflection of someone else's pain. You cease being a part of the cycle. And in that moment, there is no victory. There is no triumph over the enemy. But there is something deeper, something far more profound, the freedom to be whole again. The modern world is a machine, a vast, interconnected mechanical system designed for efficiency, productivity, and progress. But within this machine, a deep rage brews. We are living in an age of unprecedented connectivity, yet in many ways, we are more isolated than ever before. We are constantly told that technology is here to make our lives easier, to connect us in ways that transcend the limitations of time and space. But while we are connected, we are also disconnected from the very essence of our humanity. We have become cogs in a machine, programmed to perform, to produce, to consume. And in this system, where emotions are reduced to data, where human beings are increasingly viewed as mere components of a greater whole, there is something deeply unsettling. There is rage, quiet, pervasive, and all-encompassing. Friedrich Nietzsche warned of the dangers of this mechanization of life. He spoke of the last man, a person so complacent, so content in the efficiency of the machine, that they have lost all sense of purpose, all sense of true individuality. What does your conscience say? You should become the person you are, he wrote. And yet in the machine there is no room for becoming. There is no room for the self to flourish, for the human soul to expand and explore. The rage we feel in the machine is not the rage of revolt, but the rage of being stifled, suffocated by a system that demands conformity. We are told that success is measured by how well we perform, how efficiently we produce, how quickly we adapt. And in this relentless pursuit of efficiency, we lose ourselves. The machine does not care for the individual. It does not care for the unique experiences, desires, or needs that make each of us human. It only cares about output. And so we rage against it, but not outwardly. No, the rage is internalized. It is the quiet, gnawing frustration that builds inside of us, day after day, as we feel ourselves reduced to nothing more than functions within a system. Sigmund Freud spoke of the tension between the conscious and unconscious mind, and how we often suppress our true desires, our true feelings, in order to conform to societal expectations. This suppression leads to inner conflict, which, in turn, can manifest as the very rage that simmers beneath the surface. The machine asks us to ignore our deeper selves, to focus only on the tasks at hand, and in doing so, it invites this unacknowledged rage into our lives. What happens when we are asked to ignore the very things that make us human? What happens when we are told to suppress our instincts, our emotions, and our desires, all in the name of progress? The result is predictable: resentment. It builds, quietly and steadily, until it can no longer be contained. And in its wake, it leaves destruction, not of the machine, but of the very thing that gives us life, the soul. Carl Jung would say that this rage, this disconnection, is a manifestation of the shadow. The more we repress our true selves in order to fit into the machine, the more powerful the shadow becomes. And it is this shadow that will ultimately rise up and demand attention. It is not an external enemy that we must fear, but the parts of ourselves that we have denied and buried deep within. When we are constantly told to adapt, to comply, to become a part of the system, we lose our ability to reflect, to question, to become. And when we lose this ability, we lose our humanity. This is the rage of the machine. Not a rage directed outward, but a rage that eats away at the very core of who we are. But how do we escape this? How do we deal with the rage that threatens to consume us from the inside out? Fredirick Nietzsche once again provides the answer. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. The key to overcoming the rage of the machine is to reconnect with the very essence of our existence, to rediscover our why. When we are clear about our purpose, when we reconnect with the deeper meaning of our lives, we can transcend the mechanical rhythms of the world and embrace a more authentic existence. But that, too, requires effort. It requires us to confront the shadow, to examine the parts of ourselves that we have long suppressed, and to confront the anger and resentment that we have been carrying. It requires us to reject the easy answers, to question the assumptions we have been given, and to take responsibility for the rage that brews inside us. Nietzsche also spoke of the concept of becoming who you are. But what does that mean? To become who you are is not to accept the role the machine has given you. It is to look within, to discover your true self, and to live in alignment with your deepest values and desires. It is to reject the notion that you are merely a cog in the machine, and to embrace the fact that you are a unique individual capable of great things. The machine, in all its efficiency, cannot understand this. It cannot comprehend the depth of human emotion, the complexity of the individual spirit. It sees only the output, the results. And when we buy into this system, when we allow ourselves to be reduced to nothing more than units of production, we lose the very thing that makes us human. But the rage is not permanent. It is a sign, a signal that something is wrong, that something needs to change. It is a call to action, to break free from the system, to reclaim our humanity. The first step is to recognize the machine for what it is, a tool, nothing more, nothing less. And once we recognize it, we can choose to live outside of it, to embrace the chaos, the uncertainty, and the richness of the human experience. The rage will subside, but only when we choose to step outside the machine and reclaim our power, our individuality, and our humanity. Revenge is not an act, it is a process, a slow distortion of perception, intention, and ultimately identity. In the beginning, revenge feels righteous. It feels like balance. The pain inflicted upon us must be returned, not merely as punishment, but as restoration. As if hurting the one who hurt you could realign the cosmos, return what was taken, or undo what has already carved itself into the soul. But something happens on the path of vengeance. Something dark, something subtle. You start to become like them. We don't notice it at first, the tightening of the jaw, the hardening of the heart. The moment we justify doing to them what they did to us, something vital within us begins to shift. We mimic their movements, their tones, their choices, and before long, we are no longer standing in opposition to our enemy. We are their reflection. He who fights with monsters, Nietzsche warned, should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. And here is the cruel irony of revenge. It promises to set us free from what hurt us, but it often binds us even tighter. The longer we focus on what was done to us, the more we allow that pain to define who we are. We shape our identity not around healing, but around opposition. And in doing so, we hand our enemy the pen and allow them to write our story. Ask yourself, who are you becoming? Martin Luther King Jr. understood this danger well. In the face of unspeakable injustice, he did not raise his fists, he raised a principle. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. These are not soft words. They are defiant. They are sharp. They cut through the illusion that vengeance empowers. King understood what many forget. Hate multiplies. Anger echoes. And violence, unless halted, becomes generational. When you act from vengeance, you are not erasing the past. You are extending it. You are letting the pain live on in a new form. and the cycle continues. Let me ask you, is your enemy still outside, or have you invited them in? Revenge is not strength, it is surrender. Not surrender to your enemy, but to your worst impulses, to your unhealed wounds, to the version of yourself that believes becoming cruel is the only way to protect what is good. Lao Tzu, the ancient sage of the Tao, offered a radically different path, one that would sound absurd to anyone driven by rage. Respond to anger with silence and to insult with presence. The Tao does not retaliate. It bends, it yields, not because it is weak, but because it is too strong to be moved by provocation. This is a strength the revengeful cannot comprehend, because in their eyes, dignity must be defended with force. But dignity, real dignity, is not something that can be taken, only abandoned. To yield is not to cower, it is to see. It is to recognize that your worth is not determined by how deeply you can hurt your enemy, but by how untouched your essence remains in the face of pain. What if your power was not in retaliation, but in restraint? Let us return to Nietzsche once more, because his warning is not just metaphor, it is psychological truth. The more time you spend tracking the behavior of your enemy, the more your mind becomes entangled with theirs. What begins as opposition becomes imitation. There is a threshold where hatred crosses over into obsession, and obsession, over time, turns into reflection. And then you realize the enemy is in the mirror. Carl Jung would call this the shadow, the repressed, unacknowledged parts of ourselves that we reject and project onto others. In pursuing revenge, we do not eliminate the shadow, we feed it, we embody it. And the more righteous we feel in doing so, the more blind we become to the truth. We are becoming the thing we swore to destroy. Now hear this. The revenge mindset is not only ancient, it is primal. Evolution wired us for survival, to defend ourselves, to retaliate. But we are no longer animals fleeing predators. We are conscious beings, capable of awareness, of reflection, of transcendence. We can break the cycle, but not through silence alone. It begins with recognition. Ask yourself, what am I really seeking through revenge? What part of me believes that returning pain will restore peace? The more we resist becoming like our enemies, the more we must confront the enemy within. It takes profound strength to absorb pain without releasing it onto others. It takes clarity to realize that not everything broken must be avenged, and it takes wisdom to understand that healing is not revenge, and becoming whole does not require breaking someone else. If you truly want justice, begin with your own soul. Revenge is about others, but peace is always an inside job. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is rebellion against endless loops. You've made it this far. You've seen the damage. You've understood the mirror. You've stood at the edge of retaliation and stared down the abyss of becoming what you hate. And now, the exit. A door. Quiet. Unmarked. Often overlooked. Forgiveness. It is the soul's final act of defiance. You may have hurt me, but you will not shape me. This is not mercy for them. It's liberation for you. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is rebellion against endless loops. Because every time you relive the harm, every time you rehearse the injustice, you are living in the script they handed you. They act. You react. They harm. You carry, and the loop tightens. To forgive is to walk off their stage. It is to hand the pain back, not by returning it, but by refusing to carry it a moment longer. Let that sink in. Forgiveness is not about freeing them. It's about freeing yourself. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is not about ignoring what was done. It's about confronting it directly, fiercely, and choosing to become more than it. Forgiveness begins with a brutal honesty, not about the other, but about yourself. You were wounded. That is real. You were changed. That is real. But if you never integrate the pain, it will drive your life from the shadows, the parts of us we hide, deny, and bury. But what we bury is never dead. It waits. It leaks. And in the aftermath of betrayal, abandonment, or abuse, the shadow wants revenge. It wants power. It wants to never feel weak again. But here's the truth. The shadow doesn't disappear through denial, it disappears through integration. When you face your pain, not suppress it, not act it out, but confront it with awareness, you become whole. This is the deep work of forgiveness, not forgetting, but transforming. Desmond Tutu, a man who stared down apartheid and still chose peace, said this: "Without forgiveness, there is no future. Not no peace, not no healing, no future. Because pain is greedy. It feeds on the present and devours tomorrow. If left unchecked, it will turn your memory into a prison and your future into an echo of your past." Forgiveness is the refusal to be frozen in time. It is saying, what was done to me ends here, with me. It is strength, a sacred rebellion against being ruled by another's cruelty. But how? How do you forgive what feels unforgivable? Start here, by knowing the difference between pain and identity. You were hurt, but you are not the hurt. You were betrayed, but you are not the betrayal. Viktor Frankl, who survived the death camps of Auschwitz, gave us the most radical key to freedom. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose, and in our choice lies our growth and our freedom. That space is everything. That's where forgiveness lives. Not as a feeling, as a choice. You will never feel like forgiving. You can choose to stop carrying what they handed you. You can choose to break the cycle. But don't expect applause. Forgiveness is quiet. There is no parade, no cheering crowd, only silence and then peace. Only the strange, unfamiliar weightlessness that comes when you let go of what was never yours to carry in the first place. And then there is you. Not the you defined by rage, but the you beneath all that. The original, the unbroken. Who are you when no longer shaped by what was done to you? That is the real beginning. You've walked through rage, you've confronted the mirror, you've faced the labyrinth and found the door. But your journey is not over because there's another trap. It's not loud like revenge, it's quiet. It whispers. You're not good enough. Why even try? In the next chapter, we dive into the fear of failure and rejection, the silent force that stops more dreams than any enemy ever could. We'll explore how ancient wounds make us afraid to risk, to love, to try, and how to break that spell. Because if you've made peace with your past, you now face the most dangerous frontier of all, the future. Join me.